So the first question is, this comes actually from one of you, who asked, how should one respond when asked why women get a travel grant for just being a woman? So, who would like to start?
Who actually got this question? Just wondering.
Who asked it?
No, who had to answer such a question? Somebody had to answer.
I had to answer. I didn't pose the question, but I had to answer at my university a lot.
Can you share your answer?
So this is maybe that in a nutshell. I don't know what I responded, to be honest. It wasn't directly something like shut up, but it was pretty close.
Well, so there are special grants for students. Maybe the answer is similar. But, why should students get special travel grants?
I guess I would say that if you think about like your everyday life, if you're a man, when you're in a class or you're in a lab, you're surrounded generally by other men. And so I think it's really important and helpful for women to come to events like this, where they can actually meet other women and interact with them who they wouldn't normally get to speak to or meet in their everyday lives.
I think two things. Essentially, Kate's answer, right? So I don't know, 10 years ago or something in the UK, we were making profit from BNVC. So we decided that if you are a PhD student in the UK, you get a paper into CVPR or ECCV, you can go, right? So there was a student where just for studying in the UK, you got a grant to go for CVPR. And we just decided that that would be better for UK computer vision. So my position is, I axiomatically believe that it would be better for me if our community were more diverse. And I don't really care about arguments like we would design better products or whatever. I just, I'm kind of going to take that as axiomatic. And people have given grants for hundreds of years, right? So Hook was given a grant by Boyle because Hook was poor and Boyle was rich, and Boyle wanted to make the world better. So I think it's just an instance of a grant, and they're always special, and it's fine.
I think making vision conferences more inclusive will make the conferences better as a whole. Of course, it will be a big benefit to the people who get the grant and can network and can come and so on. It will help their careers, but the conference as a whole will also, improve from having a wider audience being inclusive.
I would also maybe say this is just a starting point. This doesn't mean that the travel scholarships will stop at women, but we will have more and more workshops with this kind of sponsor contributions, and then men can apply and get similar funding as well, hopefully, in the future. Okay.
Rose-colored glasses, but from, in my career, starting from when I was a grad student myself, maybe even an undergrad, the vast majority of men have been basically very supportive. I don't really remember very many negative interactions, or if there were, maybe I'm the kind of person who just sort of doesn't let it get to me. So I think the vast majority of men, probably I assume here at this conference and in our community, in academia and so on, are very supportive and kind of want to include everybody. Same, from what I observe in our group, I think our grad students by and large are very kind of outgoing and helpful and try to help each other. But I would just say essentially the male students, especially if the vast majority of the students in the group are guys, it's worth sometimes thinking about sort of not taking things for granted, their usual interactions, especially things like social interactions, maybe outside of lab hours. What do you usually do for fun? And, does it just happen to exclude women because you haven't thought about it? Maybe you do a certain kind of thing, go play like soccer or whatever it is you hadn't thought, or, you go to a pub, you hadn't thought about how to be more inclusive, or the kinds of activities, the interactions that you have, implicitly exclude somebody. So it's worth sometimes sort of going the extra mile or thinking about the effect of your usual practices
one thing to those, which is, we all know that we should call out bad behaviour when we see it. And, even as a sort of a old, confident male, it's not always that easy. Some sort of, jockey, good-looking male saying something slightly sexist. It's sometimes hard to call it out. I don't know if everybody knows we don't do that here. You know that? This is an easy way to call something out without getting into some stupid argument about, the fundamental interaction of humanity and the world. Just say we don't do that here. I find that helpful.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Would you like to add to that?
I guess just along the lines of what Pete said, in my group, I think I try to foster an environment that's very friendly and collaborative, and where people help each other out, and I think that that's been really useful, since I've never really had any issues with any particular student.
So this question is more of a practical nature. So we have seen in CVPR, I don't know if you have attended, but there's a new code of conduct that says if you spot any harassment issues, that you can then you can send an email to a particular email address. If you search for CVPR 18 code of conduct, you can read what qualifies as harassment. So we don't have that in ECCV 18. And so what should we do if we spot such behaviors? This is another question. If there is no email address, I'm not sure.
Email the CVPR address.
I mean, I'm sure you could just email any of the general chairs of the program chairs, and they'd be happy to help. Or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, I'm sure you could email any senior woman or anyone in the field, and they'd be happy to help you out.
But I think especially since CVPR took the lead with actually establishing a code of conduct and appointing an ombud, it's better if all the conferences going forward sort of get on board with that, and there's a consistent code of conduct, and maybe even an office of ombud with some continuity, or maybe all conferences going forward have to have one. I think at least for CVPR and ICCV, they're kind of under the umbrella of CVF, so CVF can take the leadership on that. CCV has its own organization, but there's no reason why it can cooperate with CVF, because I think everybody can agree on the code of conduct. Maybe revise it if it needs to be revised, but kind of make it a consistent thing in the future.
I think feel free to email anyone you think might be trustworthy, Yeah.
Or talk to them.
But I think these things, it's better to have a consistent process. Right now, since there's nothing official for ECCV, I email the organizers, but I think this needs to be handled, consistently, kind of an institutional process.
I also think in cases of really egregious things, it's important to have an anonymous process, or at least a process that ensures that you can step forward and say something without fearing that it will get back to people you think might retaliate, or just maybe you fear that might happen. Just do better reporting something in an anonymous way.
I think the CVPR website, it says that these reports are handled confidentially, so.
Or confidential, right? Maybe not fully anonymous, but at least confidential.
Our next question is of more personal nature. When you look back in time, what is the biggest mistake or failure do you think you have done? Please.
Am I sitting there? Okay.
Yes. We were talking about the past failures that you might have done, or you felt that you failed at something, and if you would like to share.
Interesting. That's a good beginning. Okay, give me a minute.
So the question is, when you look back in time, what is the biggest mistake or failure you think you have done? It might be related to gender issues, or it might be anything that you deem relevant.
like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So many mistakes. I'm sure I've made lots of mistakes in my life. The ones that I regret, I think that I tend not to say yes to opportunities, like giving talks or being on panels like this, because I'm afraid of them. Because I'm very shy, and so my tendency is that I would rather hide under a rock. And so I think that's something that I'm trying to do better at. And the good news is that the more you do them, the easier they get. And so I would definitely recommend doing things you're afraid of.
Actually, when I was a first year PhD student, my first CVPR, a friend of mine told me, go to Tamara's talk. She's a great speaker.
Yeah, this is going to be roundabout, but I think there's a definite distinction between speakers and people and researchers who are very self-confident and believe that the job of answering questions is to prove that they are right, rather than to listen to the question and answer it. Particularly if the answer is, oh yeah, sorry, I was really wrong. I used to be highly intolerant. So, and I think it's interesting because it's not so much gender biased, it's kind of like rich kids are confident and people who were poor kids are not confident. There's some split like that. Anyway, it used to make me very annoyed, and it used to make me ask questions very, very pointedly, not realizing that just because somebody looks confident doesn't mean that they are. So somebody who's, who was previously shy or, had a different upbringing can learn to be super confident, but then you can really hurt them by pushing too hard. So luckily my colleagues told me to stop doing that. And I think I've done better. But,
Well, so I will not admit to any specific failures because for some reason that's really hard to do. Because I also don't know, maybe I'm not too prone to regret, because if you say no to something, you never know how it would have turned out. Like if you happen to say yes to something and it turned out really badly, then you would know it's a failure, but you never know. I said no to this thing, you never know, it was definitely a mistake. So I think basically just as general advice, I would say don't do something just because, or if you're primarily doing it to impress other people, or you think this is something you're expected to do or supposed to be doing. Do something in your career because you believe it's the right thing to do and you're intrinsically motivated to do it. So don't sort of follow, external pressures and external expectations. There are always, these days everything is crazy. There are so many bandwagons. You always feel like you're supposed to be on some bandwagon or other. So I would just say don't. If you really genuinely want to do something, you want to research a certain topic or whatever, say yes to a certain opportunity for yourself, then it's a good idea. But if you feel like you have to say yes because everybody else is doing it, or because if you don't, you won't have visibility or whatever, that's not in itself a sufficient reason to do it. Tamara said, well, saying yes to things is good, but I think you also have to know where to draw the line, because a certain level of exposure or whatever it is, certain number of hours that you work a week might be right for you, but not beyond that. There's always kind of the right level of commitment and involvement for everybody, and of course you have to balance different life priorities. So just try to be secure in your own priorities and find the right balance.
Yeah, so two remarks. So one is more to do with research, and of course, we all make tons and tons of mistakes. So generally, I'm happy if 30% of my ideas are right. I think I would expect 70% of them are wrong, and that's what you expect. That's a process of research. You try to develop the idea, and then somewhere something goes wrong, and that's fine. So you have to operate in a culture where you yourself are willing to make mistakes, because otherwise you'll be playing very safe, and you have to have all the people around you, students, postdocs, colleagues, whatever, be totally understanding of them making mistakes in research, because otherwise you are playing it very safe. You have to know when something has gone wrong, and you have to know when when to keep pushing and when to say this is really a lost cause and time to move on. You need to have that judgment to cut your losses, which is hard, but it's worth it. More substantial answer I want to give is about I'll call it the difference between cleverness and wisdom. So when I was younger, I was impressed by all the wrong things. So you more or less you take yourself as a model and you try to judge others by that. And it's this thing of technically sharp and quick. The person who understands something quickly, who asks that kind of question, who can attack you, or who can that kind of cleverness, right? It's like I think in English there's the clever schoolboy kind of thing, right? Or the person who can debate on high table. And when you're younger, you are impressed by that, or you may be intimidated if you are not that. I think both sides happen. As you proceed in life, and as you see research over a bigger window, you realize that this is like kind of relatively unimportant. I mean, what's much more important is wisdom. It's really sort of the sense to see what is actually important, what's worth pursuing. There are plenty of clever people in the world, I think, and if you are not the most clever person, it doesn't matter. If you have good judgment and persistence and taste, eventually that matters more. I've seen this for my students. There were people whom I admitted and they were like, zillions of A+, all those criteria, and then they didn't have as good a research career over time. Whereas there were others who didn't look so outstanding, but somehow had a certain creativity, openness, and they turned out much better. And I think that we all should appreciate that diversity.
Thank you. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I'll just I think I've had to really think about what do I regret. I guess I don't spend much time regretting things, but if I had to pick something, when I was younger and I was becoming interested in research, there's so many cool ideas, and you just kind of like I want to work on that, and I want to work on this, and it took me a while to kind of find the thing that I was truly passionate about and find my community. So I actually wasn't publishing in CVPR's CV consistently until much later into my career, and I kind of went between different communities. And I think if maybe one piece of advice that might be useful that I could derive from that is if you're a young person starting out, even if kind of you're very excited by some very multidisciplinary thing, you have to be careful that you find your community and that you kind of don't spread yourself too thin, or don't have a consistent set of works in one community. So yeah, that's all I got. That's all I can come up with.
Yeah, it's indeed very difficult to stick with one subject, but because everything else also looks very interesting. But of course, there is limited time, and we must learn as much as we can during our PhD. Yeah.
I mean, that said, I don't regret it that much. It took me a while to figure out what I would regret. So yeah, I think it worked out fine.
Okay, so this question is, we would like to ask you, how can we improve women in computer vision? So we have gotten some suggestions. Some people said maybe it's better to have 2 tracks, one for junior people and one for senior people. So we have 2 tracks of talks. Maybe the junior talks are not going to be as high quality as the senior ones, but would that be a good idea? Another one is inviting only very good female speakers. So we won't have any master students or bachelor students presenting their work here, but more famous female speakers. What would be your suggestion? Or any other ideas of how to improve women in computer vision workshop? Yes, please.
I've been thinking about this a lot today. So I think a few things that we can do. So we all do this when we're giving keynotes. We all present 2 or 3 pieces of recent work, or 4 or 5, or some amount of recent work. And there's another observation that I did not see every oral at CVPR, and I'm not going to see every oral at ECCV. I think, here's a proposal, that if the conference were simply the sequence of 20-minute talks, i.e. conference-length talks, just selected from the orals of this year's conferences, the last 2 conferences. Yes, there's a risk that people would see the same talk twice. I never mind seeing the same talk twice. I never understand it the first time. And it would give you, I think, this natural mix of junior and senior, right? And there would be an artificial restriction that these talks are have female first authors or delivered by women. Well, one thing I love about being here today is that I get a cross section of vision. It's like being in BMVC in 1990. You can just get talks from all over vision, and it would. I think it would just naturally blend junior and senior. I think I quite like a lot of 20-minute talks rather than 4 keynotes. Anyway, I'll stop.
People seem to like 20-minute talks less and less. I hear more proposals that everything should be 5 minutes.
Yeah, 15 plus 5 or whatever.
For the conference, but not for the workshops.
Yeah.
That's the difference between the conference and the workshop.
I would be against sort of an overly rigid hierarchy or notion of, these people are above bar to speak and these are not. Certainly not based on master student versus PhD versus senior researcher. I think if there are submissions, it's good to basically decide who gets a spotlight or a talk based on the merit of the submissions. I liked the short talks a lot today. I would have enjoyed seeing more of them. I don't know, maybe not all 20-minute talks, but I think seeing more kind of spotlight-like talks would be good.
I think maybe the concern was if we have the same bar for both PhD student submissions and postdoc submissions and bachelor student submissions, always the postdocs and PhD students will get accepted. Should we have another track just for junior students?
Don't make it gender specific. That's a great idea, but it doesn't need to be a women in computer vision workshop.
Right.
There could be bachelor's student research conference, and I bet there'll be loads of good talks.
Yeah, that's true. It could be a different workshop, like undergrads or junior students in computer vision, and it would be them sort of getting feedback, more sort of practicing talks, or there would not be such a high level of polish expected. I don't know. This workshop was pretty good, so I think it could also easily be a day-long workshop. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with the format. I like the variety, and I think also interspersing keynote talks with shorter talks and poster sessions, that gives people variety.
One thing that I was thinking about is whether we could create a resource of commonly asked questions, like a wiki or something, which each wiki could sort of add to as we went forward in time. I don't know if there is one that exists already or not, but
There is actually, the organizers have access to it, but
not everyone else.
not everyone else.
Well, that would be good.
Okay, noted. Anything else?
Great.
Okay. So we have prepared a backup question in case no one speaks up, but this is time to ask your questions.
I think I tried to call and it didn't work. We're very good at saying, yes, we know there's inequality and this is fantastic. But what I was quite interested in is, I personal circumstance, I had some bad luck. But the reason I got out of that bad luck is because there were a small group of male academics who went out of their way to advocate for me and help me stay in academia. I know there's the argument that you shouldn't have a reward for that, it's just the right thing to do, or we don't do that here, those kinds of things. But is there any way, or maybe any ideas, that we can do some positive reinforcement of, it's almost like we want to advocate the advocacy, because we can't fix everything ourselves, we do need our other colleagues to help us. So when they do that, can we give them some reward or reinforcement to sort of keep it going in protectional motion, so to speak? Does that make
Do you mean advocating to the university or to the broader community?
Well, it could be to the research community, and it could be to students that are coming in. Sort of these are things that we do to make sure our environment is inclusive and we are diverse. Something that just promotes that their positive action works. Because particularly, it's like any marketing campaign. If you don't believe a product works, you're not going to buy it. And if there's so many times, it's like if you go down the extreme case and you have someone that's got a legal case and there's a gagging clause and you can't say anything. For those people that do, even when they're shy, they may have still stood up and helped you out in a really good way, and there's no encouragement to encourage that behaviour further.
So what do you have an idea of what kind of encouragement that could be? An award or something?
Well, this is what I mean. It's not necessarily. I'm trying to say it's not necessarily an award, but some kind of gratitude. So to use, it's a very poor example, but the only thing I could do in my case was I was invited to speak on International Women's Day on a video and to say what to do moving forward. And I used that video as an opportunity to name some of these people that helped me and said the examples of what they did, so that I knew that anybody that saw that video didn't just know who it was that could stand up and stick up for you if you needed them, but also what those particular examples were. So one thing, for example, was I was in a very bad situation, and they set me up as an external researcher at another university so that I could keep publishing. And some of those things are a lot of administration and actually quite a lot of effort to sort out. So if someone's going to go to that effort to stick up for you, whether they're standing up for you in a meeting because you're being talked over, or whether they're putting a lot of work into give you opportunities, those examples we kind of need to share, as opposed to always say it's not fair, it's unfair. So things like the travel award question that came up, it's a really good thing to do, but it's not a reward, it's not an advantage, that's just making the playing field fair.
So I think you have a good point. Yeah. I don't really have any immediate ideas. That I think probably the people who were helping you and are helping others are motivated, internally. I don't know if external reward is sufficient, but I guess it would be nice to recognize the people who are.
That's what I mean. It's not necessarily a reward, but cultural change takes time. You know that. But if we can kind of give it a gentle nudge by showing good ways forward, somehow. I don't know the answer. That's why it's just maybe a food for thought.
In any form of teaching, I think examples are great. And even if the person didn't want to be named, you could still somehow publish the example. I mean, it sounds like what you've done is a useful reminder to us that examples of good behavior are really helpful.
And I think most university departments care about mentoring, mentoring of junior colleagues by senior colleagues. So I agree, examples, if you have any influence or, we should all keep in mind if we have any influence on how the mentoring process is structured, how to make it work better. I guess examples like these, this is what the senior colleague could do specifically to help a junior colleague, especially maybe a female colleague or somebody who's underrepresented. These are the things that might not occur to you, but these have been very helpful.
Okay, so we have actually a couple of questions from that are submitted in the form. I will ask one of them. Throughout your PhD studies, were you able to maintain a study-life balance, or does excelling in the field require a lot of sacrifice in this regard?
I can go first. So I increasingly don't believe in study-life balance, and I believe in study-life support or work-life support. And what I mean by that is, to me, the notion of balance always means that kind of you have limited resource and you're trying to spread it across multiple things. You have all these balls in the air, and you by yourself are trying to balance your time. And I like to think of it more as, external support flowing in. So if you have that external support, that's what makes it possible for you to be happy as a researcher, as a PhD student. So, especially, of course, it's important to exercise and to sleep, and, to take care of yourself, practice self-care. That's very important. But, if you're someone like me, I had 2 kids during my PhD, and you know, I couldn't have done it without all the external support I've received from my spouse, from my advisor, from lots of people. I had a full-time nanny. I honestly don't know how people can have kids without a full-time nanny and still be a PhD student or a functioning professional. And like I did a lot of things that it wasn't just me balancing myself across all these things in my life and my work, but hiring help whenever possible, and just kind of some things you say, okay, that's not that important. I don't want to be the perfect mom because that's less important to me to be Instagram perfect than just that my kids love me and we have fun together, right? It's not important to me to make beautiful lunchboxes every morning, but it's more important that I come home and I'm there, I'm present, and we have fun together. We play games and that kind of thing. So kind of that sense of balance is, I think, more important to me. That just kind of balance, prioritizing what you want to spend time on. Anything else?
I think it's very important, especially for students, not to get caught up in some sort of a toxic, lab culture or dynamic where you think, oh, I need to basically pull all-nighters for weeks and weeks before a conference, or oh, everybody is publishing, 3 papers a conference, or get caught up in some sort of a competitive loop. That's really not healthy. I think it's also not healthy for the community. Things are moving fast enough already. So everybody should decide, basically. I mean, I do think that there's some sort of intrinsic balance. External support is certainly important, but also intrinsically, and research is not such a thing where, you can, basically, the outputs are not proportional to the inputs that you put in terms of effort. There's a lot, some people are just somehow more efficient in some way, more lucky or more creative or whatever. They seem to get a lot done without spending long hours in the lab, and other students might spend long hours in the lab and not manage to get anything done. So I think everybody just has to decide, well, this is what I need to do to be happy and healthy, and just do it, and not get caught up in some notion that, oh, everybody is publishing or submitting to the next conference. If I don't submit to the next conference, I'm worthless. You sort of need to step back.
According to your experience, how was it? Maybe some people would like to think, oh, I was very lazy, but I made it here. Is there any example?
Well, I'm lazy.
Yeah,
I will freely admit to being lazy.
I have to check the audience before I say it.
yeah.
The world does not need more computer vision papers. I think it's good to have papers, but basically it has to be something that stands out. It's not something that, oh, I will submit it in case it gets through the reviewing process. You should be basically doing things that are worthwhile. It's not necessary to do a lot. So for me, okay, if I work an extra 3 hours a day, sure, I could probably have another paper happen or write another couple of proposals, but what will change in the grand scheme of things? So I think you need to draw a line somewhere.
Because I have one more question that is very interesting. Were you ever faced with a situation where you need to decide based on merit or affirmative action when you choose an employee? And how do you decide where to draw the line? Would you like to start?
We've got 8 minutes, and
Yeah.
finally gets to the question of the bar.
Sorry, what the question was, married or?
Merit or affirmative action, so choosing a female candidate over a male one.
But you're saying, did you ever choose a worse person because of their protected characteristic, race, gender, or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And I think since the last week, Michael Black gave some good answers to that, and I've been thinking about them a lot since. I used to think, oh yes, if we want the world to go forward, then we've got to make such decisions. But now, every time I think about it, it doesn't happen. So consider assembling a diverse slate. Okay, so you've got a position coming up. You assemble a slate of people you want to interview. Look at the slate. Is it diverse? If not, add people until it is. You cannot end up with a worse candidate that way, right? You've just added more work for yourself. You've done more work, and there's possibly an argument that your selection gets worse if you've done more work. But really, you've just added, let's say, 1 woman to your panel of 4 men, 20% extra work. I think it just doesn't have to happen that way. And then Michael had a brilliant argument that I've been thinking about for the last 6 months or 3 months or whatever it is since CVPR. He was saying this: if I interview a 50-year-old Irish person who's worked in British computer vision for 30 years, I'm probably going to make a pretty good estimate of how good they are in an hour's discussion or something, right? So, whereas if I interview, someone from a culture that I don't understand, completely different age, I'm just not going to make as good an estimate. So he was saying, imagine, right? The argument doesn't break if this is false. Imagine that the way you select candidates is that they have ratings from 0 to 10, and you want to pick the highest one. So I interview, white Irish male, and I say, this person's definitely a 7.5 plus or minus 1, right? And that's fine. So that's my error. 7.5 plus or minus 0.5. And then I interview, millennial full of tattoos. I don't really understand. And I say, wow, this person is like a 7 plus or minus 2. Right? And the 7's probably biased down. Let's imagine I've corrected it. So I've got a 7 plus or minus 2. That's a 5 to a 9. Or I've got a 7 to an 8. There are some jobs for which you need 9s. Right? There are some coding jobs where, someone who's grade 8 at coding just can't do it. You can give it to them all week and they can't do it. Somebody who's a 9 can do it in an afternoon. So, so what I'm saying is an argument is still, you can actually go higher by hiring people you don't understand. You can have wider variance. That's the way to get 9s. That's the way football coaches with small teams get 9s. Sorry, I've gone off for out stages.
Thank you.
And you're kind of assuming that people actually can be ranked.
Oh, yeah. But even if that's false, I think the argument is still fine. Because the question was, did you hire somebody worse? Whatever scale that is.
I mean, what you're giving is the argument for explore, exploit, right? In bandits, essentially, you have K-arm bandits. What you do is you have bounds for everyone, and some will be bigger error bars, and you pick the example with the higher, there is a possibility of the 9, basically, the highest confidence, the upper bound. You go with that. And then...
So, yeah, I agree with that. And also, what I've never had to make a decision where I picked someone who I thought was worse because I thought it was an affirmative case. But what I have done is rethink the criteria that are being used for evaluation. So, sometimes, just because, of course people can be ranked, but just because we have so many applicants, sometimes we have to rank them on something, right? And so it ends up being, your Jerry score or this or that, or how many publications you already have, let's say if you're undergraduate. So it becomes numbers, right? And so sometimes you have to rethink those numbers and think, are they actually reflecting the kind of person that you want in your group, right? Do you want a group full of people who get the maximum Jerry score? Or maybe you care about something other than the Jerry score, right? And like one of the things I'll give as an example is the number of publications that people already have when they're applying for a PhD, which is kind of ridiculous in my opinion, but it's almost become standard now that people are looking for PhD applicants who already are doing a PhD. And I've rethought that in the past because the kinds of undergrads that may already have a publication, maybe they have a better network, better social network, and they hear about these opportunities. Maybe because they're more male supervisors and they're more likely to take on male undergrads working for them and give them these opportunities. You know, for some reason, maybe they're getting more opportunities, and maybe female applicants are getting fewer of these opportunities, and so they have fewer publications. So there could be these things at work that are not being reflected in just number of publications. So yeah, it is hard work actually going to interview the person and reading their statement and doing all these things. But I think we have to do it because the number doesn't tell us the picture.
The one thing which it's consistent with my earlier statement, but I've seen over time is that the error bars are actually quite high. And in terms of, I mean, when I was younger, I used to think, oh yes, I can estimate people and say this person is a 6.7 and this person is a 7.2. That was just foolish and wrong. Over time, you realize that, one aspect is the multidimensionality, right, which you talked about before. But the other is that the error bars are actually very large. And just sort of picking a threshold on GI score or number of papers and so on is really foolish because the error bars are very, very large. And the way to convince yourself of this is that you follow people over time. So, I mean, this is one of the things that happen when you become an old fogey. You've seen enough examples of people. So I have people whom I can say, okay, this is what they look like at their PhD stage, and this is what they look like 10 years later, 20 years later. And you just see how big the error bars are. Once you backpropagate that into your initial decision function, you realize that actually being stuck up on one feature is just so foolish. It's like essentially saying the second letter of your name, it doesn't have an A or an E. It's as inconsequential as that.
Thank you very much. I really hate to stop the discussion because we have run out of time. Perhaps you could.
I just want to make a generic comment. I probably we don't have these numbers now, but I really want to see what is the percentage of gender, or that is, what is the percentage of female researchers at this moment, of, for example, this female attendance in this conference compared to the big number, because we have a very big constraint. Our students, our researchers are coming from undergraduate study, and having an undergraduate study where we have 5 to 10% of female, so definitely we have a bound. We cannot surpass 50% of female researchers, right? So I really want to see the real problem that is at this moment, what is the percentage of female investigators with respect to the community, and then compare this to the undergraduate study, because we have this bound.
Yeah, some statistics suggest that undergrad population is okay actually, but the higher we go, the ratios decrease.
In Spain, female in informatics are 5%. So I don't know statistics in different countries, but then
there's more work in
so
Spain to be done.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to thank all our speakers and you for attending.
Thank you to the organizers.